I always tell my students the same thing, that these ought to be 4 of the best years of your lives.
Simply because I'd been a college student and the rest of the guys were not college students, and simply because I got to go back and tell you I had volunteered in the Army and wasn't a draftee. I had a serial number 071688420, which meant that I was a volunteer, and this old Army hated draftees, but they were very kind to volunteers. Anyway, I got off and I was in a chemical warfare unit. Again, I volunteered. They said, can anybody type? The best course I ever took in University City High School, because I was one of the few male students, because typing was always reserved for the girls, but because I was a track man in University and went out for track, I substituted track, physical education for typing. I said, sure, I can type. So they put me in the headquarters company typing. I went from that into teaching because I had an interest in teaching, and I began to teach courses like first aid of mustard gas and how to identify various gases, and I became a master sergeant. Throw mustard gas in there. All the guys that had apples in their gas mask instead of the gas mask, they got their eyes burned. When we wanted to teach them treatment against mustard gas, I'd say, do you have any questions? No questions. We'd get them up, march them down the toxic gas yard, spray mustard on their arms. If they had paid attention to the lessons, they didn't have a burn. If they hadn't paid attention to the lessons, they had a big whelp on their arm. And the government used to say, we wish our public schools would be as good as the Army schools. Well, they would if they treated the students the same way as the Army treated the veterans or the servicemen.
But I fell into this job. I was a graduate student at St. Louis U. And the nun who taught philosophy here at Maryville, very brilliant. They called her 7 Degrees Keys. She's an Oxford PhD. She became very ill in midsummer and was dead by August. So suddenly they found themselves minus a philosophy professor when school was about to open. And the odd thing about the story is that I was never in my room during the daytime. I was out studying in the library or hanging out, or in the day I wouldn't be in my room at all. This particular day I was there for whatever reason, and the phone rang and I answered it, and it was Professor Holloway, and he said, would you like to have this teaching job? I said, yes, what is it? And he told me, and so that's the deal. Had I not been there, which would be more common, he would have simply gone to the next person on the list. And you talk about serendipity, you know, just unbelievable circumstantial good luck.
Well, I was in college at Cape Girardeau. College kids have a tendency to go to bars and have a good time on Friday night and Saturday night. So, well, I didn't really remember him because obviously I was having a good time, and I had a boyfriend with a brand new Studebaker, and he had this old Ford convertible 1940. Well, that was passé compared to a brand new Studebaker. So, and right after the war, automobiles were a little difficult to get because they hadn't built too many of them. So the Studebaker was really pretty special. But that romance did not last, so when Marshall came around one other time and wanted to take me to bowling, I accepted the date. At the end of the summer, he said, I think you ought to try to get a job, and then we could get married. So I took the county teacher's examination, which substituted for college graduation, and passed it, so they gave me a temporary license, and I was teaching 7th and 8th grade mathematics.
So I came out to Maryville. I didn't know where it was, what it was. I had no idea what they wanted me to teach. I never taught anything. I was a second-year graduate student. I mean, wet behind the ears. And I came out here, well, it was like paradise. I mean, 400 really some awesome-looking girls. And I was a young buck. I was 22, 23 years old. Well, I came out and said, man, this is really something. Then, my first day, the president, Sister Mary Blish, called for me to come and visit her in her office. And she sat across the desk from me. She was very nice, and she was a very, very brilliant woman. And she was trying to make me feel at home, I think. And she said, well, you know, Mr. Wickersham, we encourage our young single faculty to date our senior girls. And I was just kind of floored. I thought, wow, that is, talk about died and gone to heaven. How sweet is that?
They sent me down to Patton's Third Army, and I was in Vienna when the war ended in 42, 45 in Europe, I guess. Then I was on my way back to Japan, and if Truman had not given the order to drop the atomic bomb, I would have probably not been here today, because I was on my order. We were going to invade Japan, and the Japanese would not have given up too early. So I really thank Truman.
Well, if I hadn't met Marshall at that bar, my life would have been totally different, I'm quite sure. He encouraged me in everything I wished to do, which was wonderful. In fact, he had to promise my mother that when we were married in 1947 that I would finish my degree, and of course I did.
And another funny little wrinkle on that was that, of course, I wasn't making any money at all. I mean, it was hard. But so one of the nuns, God love her, Sister Helmuth, called me into her office. She said, "Well, John, you know, how are you and Barbara and the babies doing?" "Well, it's tough, sister. We're doing okay, but I mean, I don't have two nickels to rub together." She said, "Well, let me think about this." So a day or so later, she called me back and she said, "I have a proposition. Would you like to be a janitor?" I said, "Well, what do you mean?" She said, "Well, one of our janitors, the guy who cleaned up all the classrooms after school, he quit. If you want to do that, I'll give you $200 a month more." I said, "Are you kidding? I'll do it." So I was then the janitor. It took me 4 hours usually. Hard work. But I was happy to have it. Without that, I could have never made it.
My advice for young people is not give up and create your own job if you have to. And that might be what you have to do, because I understand that jobs are very difficult to get these days.
Well, what I do want to say to you, if you still have it on, is there's nothing wrong with networking. The problem is networking will get you a job, but networking will not keep the job. Do not worry about who you know or what influence you use to get your job, but be sure you've got the skills to keep the job after you do the networking. I've done a lot of networking in my life, and I don't regret a single minute of it, because I thought I had the ability to do the job after I got the contacts that I needed.
I always tell my students the same thing, that these ought to be 4 of the best years of your lives. Have fun, that's really important, and it is important to have fun. But as well, 4 years to really grow in understanding. 4 years that you're really able to devote yourselves to becoming a well-educated person. Because once you're out in the world and earning a living and raising kids and so on, you're not going to have the leisure to do that. You're not going to be able to learn a language. You're not going to be able to pursue something that you'd like to learn about. You're not going to be able to do foreign study. Those things, that's what college is for. So use the opportunity you've got here to really grow and read and think and talk, so that you so that you're ready to enter into the company of educated people when you leave this place. So that is my advice. Gather ye rosebuds while ye may, as the poet says. Time is still a-flying. This same flower that smiles today, tomorrow will be dying. Time is passing us by, and passing you by. I came here when I was 23. I'm 72. This is my 49th year. I've been here 50 years. It seems like it was only yesterday. So